In today's video, I'm going to talk about how tight hips affect your gait, your walking, and how you can actually retrain your movement patterns and improve your gait, and then also comfort around your low back and the knees as you are walking. In my previous video, I talked about how tight hips affects your low back and the knees and the breathing posture as well. So if you haven't watched my previous videos, then please check my previous videos. So if you have a tight hips, limiting your ability to extend your hip as you're walking, then as you take a step in walking, so basically the tight hip extension means that you have a short hip flexors, not allowing you to extend through your hips, right? So when you take a step forward, and let's say this side of my hip is short and tight, not allowing me to extend through my left hip. And what will happen is it starts to pull my pelvis and pull my lumbar, your low back, into extension. So I'm starting to arch my back to compensate because I don't simply have the ability to extend through my left hip. So I'm having to extend through my back instead. So basically a lot of compression through my low back every step, a long step that I take in walking. Same thing with the right side, right? Either that, or I do have to adapt to the length of my hip flexors by shortening my steps. So I'm taking the shorter steps in order to avoid overcompensating and extending excessively through my lower back, right? So the people who have difficulty with long distance walking or extended period of time may be related to not having the ability to extend through the hips. So they are constantly stressing their low back every step they take, or even standing. They don't have enough length in their hip flexors to allow them to extend through the hips in standing. So that's already pulling their low back into that extension, and they don't like that. Maybe that's you, okay? So for those people, it is important for them to improve their ability to actually move through the hips, extend through the hips, so that they can allow the hips to extend fully so that they don't compensate and extend through the low back instead. So that would be a really nice thing to do. So how do you do that? And you may have been given some hip flexor stretches, right? One of those stretches like doing this, or maybe lunging, stretching position. And most of the time, the people don't really have that extension through the hips. So they're putting their leg or the hip into the extension range that they don't have. So what they're doing, instead of really stretching, extending through the hips, they're actually compensating, they're stressing and then extending through the low back even more. That's probably not very smart. From a perspective of retraining your nervous system, you want to change the way you use your body, you move in a functional way, in daily movements and activities. So, well, let's actually get into the movement practice today. So now this movement retraining specifically focuses on improving your ability to extend through the hips. And I want you to be very, very intentional with this practice. And think from a functional perspective. What I mean by that is, and people don't really think from a functional perspective, and when they are actually doing the movement practice, they think, oh, this is the tight hip. I need to stretch it, right? But you really think about, okay, what is it that you're really trying to improve and why you need to improve and what exactly you need to change. So this is about the walking. It is about all the functional movement that requires you to extend, right? So I'm very specific with the tying this practice, this movement retraining to walking. And in that context, you think about how can you change how you move through the hips. Common stretching, half kneeling or standing hip extension stretches, the way that people might do is just pushing the hips forward, leaning, and trying to extend through the hips. Yeah, you sure may feel some stretching through the hip flexors, but at the same time, you are extending through the back, and which is your habitual movement patterns already. So why would you keep doing the same way? That doesn't really help you. You want to change how you move so you don't really end up in stressing your low back over and over when you stretch and lengthen your hips, right? You don't have that much hip extension anyways, so stop extending through the back if you want to really improve your walking and comfort with walking. So what I would do is I would just put myself in this vertical alignment. My hip is over my knee and my knee is over my ankle, myself. And this is already challenging for a lot of people. What they're really learning to do is they're learning to extend through the hip here. Don't go forward, but think vertically and you push yourself. Push your knee down into the floor. Then you can begin to actually extend through the hips. Relax your abs. You don't need to use your abs, right? So you need to learn how to lengthen and extend through your hips. The one that is standing, vertical one. Here, by pushing your knee down into the floor. Then you may feel a little bit of engagement through here, a little bit of strength, the lengthening through the front of your thigh. In other words, you're actually engaging your hip extensors. That is how you walk. You push through the leg and to extend through the hips. But that doesn't extend through your back. That only extends through your hips. That's exactly how you want to engage your hip extension in your walking, right? Pushing through the foot and fully lengthening, extending through the hips before starting to extend through the low back. So practice learning how to engage and then extend through the hips without engaging and extending through your low back. And then you can relax. Practice contracting, engaging, and lengthening through the hip flexors, and then relaxing. And then switch over to the other side. Same thing, extending through the hips, not through the low back. That's different from doing this stretching, which you may have done, which you may be already doing, still doing, right? Instead of doing that, it's not about how far you lean forward. Sure, this is an extension of your hips as well as extension of your low back, but you want to be able to differentiate hip extension from your lumbar extension, right? And this is already enough. This puts you in very end of the hip extension. Then you can starting to really clearly differentiate the lumbar extension from the hip extension. Then you want to train your gait intentionally. You think about extending through your hips, but not extending through your back and the hip all together. More intentional walking, allowing your hips to extend fully, differentiating from your lumbar extension. Your lumbar is going to extend a little bit, but you don't want to keep reinforcing your habitual patterns that is really adding more stress to your low back, right? You want to change your hip mobility by retraining your movement patterns. Hope this helps, and if you like this video, and please support my channel by subscribing my channel and hitting the like button. And if you want to become the best expert in how your body wants to move, and please join my free masterclass. The link is in the description below, and inside the masterclass, and you can apply for my comprehensive movement course called Understanding How Your Body Moves Method. So I'll see you in the next video.